Think about the last time you walked into a really high-end art museum.
Oh, yeah. The atmosphere is just instantly completely different.
Exactly. You step off this chaotic, bustling street, and suddenly you are enveloped in this, like, totally different ecosystem. The walls are sterile and white.
And the temperature is always perfectly, almost aggressively controlled.
Right. And the lighting is engineered to eliminate shadows. But the weirdest part is how the behavior of the people around you just shifts instantly.
Everyone starts whispering.
Yeah, whispering, standing with their hands clasped behind their backs. They're nodding solemnly, furrowing their brows at these massive framed canvases.
There's this overwhelming, suffocating expectation of profound seriousness in those spaces.
Totally. You are trained to look at a famous painting and immediately search for the tragedy. You look for the deep melancholy or the heavy existential statement the artist was supposedly trying to make about the human condition.
It's almost religious, honestly. We treat these spaces as cathedrals of culture.
Which is a great way to put it.
And in doing so, we strip the art of its actual humanity. We assume that because something is hanging in a gallery with a multi-million-dollar price tag, its origins must be equally austere and, philosophical.
And that assumption is exactly what gets completely shattered when you step into the world of Fredrik Backman's breathtaking novel, My Friends. It was translated by Neil Smith, by the way.
It's a phenomenal text.
It really is. Today, we are stepping into this bittersweet, deeply moving narrative that just subverts every expectation we have about art, about trauma, and honestly, about adulthood itself.
For context, if you aren't familiar, Backman is an author who is often referred to as the Dickens of our age.
Yeah, people probably know him best from A Man Called Ove or Anxious People.
Right. But the text we are diving into today comes from an advanced reader's proof. And what's wild is it actually includes a raw, unfiltered letter from the publisher.
Oh man, that letter.
It's intense. The publisher talked about printing the manuscript, locking his office door, and literally just weeping at his desk.
Which, when a seasoned publisher, someone who reads thousands of manuscripts and is essentially inoculated against cheap emotional manipulation, locks his door to cry, you know you're dealing with something special.
Absolutely. It bypasses the intellectual filters and taps into a very raw, universal nerve.
So in this deep dive, we are exploring the enduring power of childhood friendship. We're looking at the mechanics of how art functions, not as a cure, but as a lifeline.
And how the invisible, silent traumas of our youth shape the architecture of the adults we ultimately become.
The narrative stage Backman builds to do this is just fascinating. He gives us two intertwined timelines.
Right. So in the present day, we follow an 18-year-old girl named Louisa.
And she is fiercely brilliant, but she is carrying a massive amount of grief. She's incredibly combative, like constantly on the defensive.
Because in her arms, she is literally carrying a box that contains the ashes of a world-famous artist, along with one of his paintings.
Which is such a striking image, and that serves as the anchor point to the second timeline, which is set 25 years earlier.
That past timeline pulls us back into the lives of four deeply broken teenagers in this distant seaside town.
They're spending these sweltering, seemingly endless summer days hanging out on an abandoned fishing pier.
And the connective tissue between these two worlds, between this grieving 18-year-old girl today and those four lost 14-year-olds a quarter century ago, is that painting she's carrying.
Right. It is a world-famous piece called The One of the Sea.
I want to look at this painting first because it brings us directly to the core thesis of the entire book.
Which Backman states right up front, right?
Yes, he basically argues that teenagers are the best kind of humans and adults are completely out of their minds.
It's a massive claim to make, but looking at The One of the Sea, you immediately see the profound disconnect between how the adult world perceives human connection and the raw reality of it.
We can view this entire thing through the lens of misunderstanding. The adult world, the people bidding millions of dollars at high-end auctions, they look at this painting by the renowned artist known as C.J.A.T.,
whose real name is Christian, but his friends call him Kim Kim.
Exactly. So the critics see these three tiny figures sitting at the very end of a long pier, pushed all the way to the corner of the canvas.
And because of the title, The One of the Sea, and because of the vastness of the water depicted, the art critics just over-intellectualize it.
Oh, entirely. They write these long essays about how it represents a profound, melancholic depiction of the vast, serious ocean.
Right, like humanity's insignificance in the face of nature.
But it completely undercuts the pretension of the art world when you realize the truth. And Louisa knows the truth.
Because Kim Kim didn't paint three random figures pondering the vastness of the universe. He painted himself and his two best friends, Jor and Ted.
And they aren't having a silent existential crisis on that pier.
No, they are vibrating with laughter. The only reason they look so tense and focused in the painting is because Jor just let loose an earth-shattering fart.
It is the ultimate inside joke against the adult world.
It really is.
But it's not just a crude joke. It's actually deeply philosophical. What's fascinating is the mechanism behind why Kim Kim chose to immortalize that specific ridiculous moment.
Right, because toward the end of his life, he knows he is dying at 39 from a terminal illness. So he hides away from the world.
He develops this entire complex framework for understanding existence. He calculates that human breath is 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and 100% anxiety.
I love that line so much. He argues that healthy people who aren't constantly fighting for survival, aren't quite right in the head because they just take life for granted.
But the twist is, he believes taking life for granted is actually the entire point of living.
Which sounds contradictory at first.
It does, but think about it. When you are chronically ill or when you grow up in chronic trauma, getting out of bed requires a monumental, exhausting amount of imagination.
The sheer gravity of existence is just so heavy.
Exactly. So Kim Kim's view is that when we aren't thinking about death, when we are doing things society deems as, wasting time like drinking cheap soda, swimming in a dirty harbor, laughing at stupid bodily function jokes on a pier that isn't a waste of time at all.
It is a profound act of magnificent rebellion against death.
Yes, painting his friends laughing at a fart is the highest form of art to him because it declares, hey, we existed, these were our bodies, and for one tiny fraction of a second, we were completely free of the anxiety of dying.
I was struck by how beautifully this plays out in the collision between Louisa and Ted on a train later on.
Oh, that train scene is incredible.
Louisa's carrying Kim Kim's ashes and the painting, and she manages to track down Ted, who is now an adult.
And adult Ted has become incredibly rigid. His heart is basically encased in concrete.
Yeah, he hasn't cried or really felt anything in ages because the grief of losing his friends is just too vast to process.
So Louisa is sitting across from him on this train, and she's just this bundle of nervous, grieving teenage energy. She just starts babbling.
She literally points at this multi-million-dollar masterpiece and says, "I've always thought it looked like one of you had just farted."
You really have to analyze the psychological shift in Ted in that moment. He has spent decades trying to hold his emotional state together through sheer force of will.
Right.
And he is looking at this teenager who has just completely punctured the solemn, tragic aura surrounding his dead friend's legacy.
He looks at the painting, looks at Louisa, points to one of the figures and confirms it. He says, "That's Jor. He was the one who farted. He had incredible farts."
It's like he was completely made out of eggs.
The tension just completely shatters. Louisa cracks up, and Ted almost laughs too. The text explicitly notes it's the closest he's gotten to laughing since his friends died.
It really makes you wonder how much we miss in our own lives because we're too busy looking for grand, sweeping meaning.
Exactly. Instead of just letting ourselves enjoy the ridiculous, beautiful reality of a shared laugh.
We over-intellectualize our grief and our memories. We treat them like those sterile museums we talked about.
When the reality of love is often just sitting on a dock with your friends, smelling a terrible fart.
But we also have to understand that the laughter on that pier wasn't just casual, carefree, teenage immaturity.
No, it was an active, desperate survival mechanism.
They weren't just laughing to pass the time. They were laughing to keep from drowning.
And to understand the function of that humor, we really have to examine the environment they were trying to survive. Which brings us to the concept of the 14-year-old mafia.
Such a powerful metaphor.
Backman writes that being 14 is like joining the mafia. You can't leave it because you know too much.
I thought about that deeply. At 14, you are in this brutal transitional phase. You aren't a child who can be easily comforted by a parent anymore.
But you also aren't an adult with any real agency or resources.
Exactly. Your friends become your primary attachment figures. They know every corner of you, all the weakest, most vulnerable places.
And you fiercely protect those secrets from the adult world.
The psychology of peer attachment in adolescence, especially in environments of trauma, is essentially about building a surrogate family structure.
Because when the primary caregivers are absent or abusive or incapable, children just form a phalanx.
Society might look at these four kids and see delinquents, but internally, they are an impenetrable fortress.
Let's break down what each of them is dealing with at home. Jor is living in constant terror of an abusive, alcoholic father.
And Kim is described as a fragile paper boat heading for a waterfall. His nervous system is so overwhelmed by his reality that he steals pills from medicine cabinets just to numb the sensory overload.
And you have Ted, who is an immigrant kid struggling with a new language. He feels this profound sense of inadequacy.
He's terrified to speak because every mispronunciation is just a glaring reminder of his otherness to the world.
And finally, Ollie, the fierce girl who hates dresses. She is carrying the crushing weight of a father who owes money to incredibly dangerous people.
So none of these kids have a safe harbor at home.
None of them, so they have to invent one. They create these intense, almost primal rituals to prove to themselves that they exist and that they are safe.
The Year Game is the perfect example of this. It's a fascinating study in trauma survival and grounding techniques.
Can you explain how the game works?
Yeah, so during the summer, they run along the pier and throw themselves into the deep, dark water. But Backman describes the water not as refreshing, but as heavy.
Right. It's almost oppressive.
It's a place where they flail wildly against the deep, their thin bodies growing heavy, as if invisible claws are pulling at them from the depths.
It's a physical manifestation of the emotional suffocation they experience in their homes.
Exactly. But then they rocket to the surface. The moment they break into the air, the first one violently gasps for breath and yells, "Here!"
Then the next one breaks the surface and yells, "Here!" until all four have called out.
And they do the exact same thing on freezing, pitch-black winter mornings when they meet at the crossroads before school.
The dark mornings in that part of the world are just oppressive, and they just stand there and shout, "Here! Here! 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 Here!"
It's a roll call. And psychologically, it is a profound grounding exercise.
How so?
When a child is living in a state of hypervigilance, their brain is constantly telling them they are in danger of being erased, of literally not surviving the night.
Wow.
Yelling "here" is a way of forcing reality to acknowledge their existence. It means, I survived the dark. I survived the monsters in my house. My body is still functioning, and I'm not alone because I can hear you yelling back.
That gives me chills. And because they operate like a mafia, they develop this hyper-attuned sense to each other's trauma.
They don't even need to ask questions. They can just feel when the ecosystem is threatened.
There's that harrowing sequence where Jor doesn't show up at the crossroads one morning.
That scene is so tense.
He had spent the entire night awake in his bedroom, clutching a knife he had hidden in the dirt beneath the flowers outside.
He was just listening for his drunken dad's key in the lock.
Fully prepared to kill his own father, to protect himself and his mother.
Think about the physiological toll that takes on a 14-year-old's nervous system. He has been flooded with cortisol and adrenaline for hours, sitting in the terrifying silence of an abusive home, holding a weapon.
The trauma isolates him completely. He cannot go to school the next morning and pretend everything is normal. He is trapped in the shame and the horror of what his life is.
And his friends just know. They wait for him at the crossroads as long as they can, and when he doesn't show, they don't go to class.
They walk to his house and just stand outside his window.
They don't knock on the door. They don't demand he come out and explain himself. Through the very skin of their friendship, they just absorb his danger.
What is crucial here is how they handle the aftermath when he finally does come out.
Right, because in our modern adult world, we might expect a deep emotional conversation. We want to sit the traumatized person down and process the feelings.
But that is an adult framework, and often forcing a child to articulate their trauma only deepens their shame.
Especially teenage boys in this era and environment. They do not have the vocabulary for therapy.
So they use misdirection, which is incredibly powerful. As they're finally walking away from the house, Ted does something that requires immense bravery.
Remember, Ted is terrified of speaking. He is incredibly self-conscious about mispronouncing words in his second language.
But he sees a squirrel, points directly at it, and confidently yells, "Artichoke!"
It's a brilliant, deliberate sacrifice of his own ego. His older brother had tricked him into thinking the word for squirrel was artichoke years ago.
So Ted knows it's the wrong word now, but he weaponizes his own insecurity to break the dark, suffocating mood gripping Jor.
He makes himself the butt of the joke to pull his friend back from the psychological edge.
And it works perfectly. The friends laugh so hard they physically fall over, the tension shatters.
And Jor, recognizing what Ted just did for him, immediately retaliates with his own ridiculous story about convincing his mom that people with a fur allergy can't eat kiwis.
A lie she apparently still believes.
It's an exchange of absurdities that completely defangs the horror of the previous night.
Jor later codifies this dynamic by explaining what he calls the harbor code.
Oh, the harbor code is brilliant. He talks about the men working in the shipyards, moving massive, multi-ton shipping containers.
It is an incredibly dangerous environment.
You cannot constantly look up to see if a container is going to crush you. You have to do your job. So you rely on the harbor code. You trust the guy standing behind you to yell, "Watch AT," if a container is swinging at your head.
That analogy is flawless. That friend group is a miniature harbor.
Exactly.
They are constantly navigating an environment where the multi-ton containers are their parents' addictions, debts, and violence.
They are watching each other's blind spots. Yelling artichoke was Ted yelling "Watch AT" before Jor was completely crushed by his own isolation.
It raises such a compelling question for you to think about in your own life. Who are the people in your life who help you pull the knife away from the door?
Who yells "Watch out"? And crucially, who knows exactly how to make you laugh so hard you forget the swinging container for just a minute.
But it takes immense energy to constantly watch the sky for falling containers.
It really does. And children, no matter how fiercely they love each other, cannot sustain that level of vigilance indefinitely without external help.
The universe is fundamentally unkind to fragile things, which introduces a vital thematic shift in the narrative.
We have to talk about the mentors in the margins, because peer support isn't always enough to survive systemic failure.
Backman frames this exploration with a quote from, of all things, the movie Ratatouille.
I love that detail.
He uses the character Anton Ego's realization. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends.
Backman uses this to explore the incredibly fragile nature of potential and how it requires external belief, adult belief, to survive the gauntlet of youth.
We see this beautifully articulated in a quiet scene between young Kim Kim and a school janitor.
Kim Kim feels entirely alienated. He perceives the world differently. He has this burning desire to create, but the school system and society at large are signaling to him that he's broken, useless, just a freak.
He is on the verge of entirely shutting down, and the janitor pulls him aside and delivers this profound speech about the nature of talent.
The janitor tells him that some children are born with wings, but the world is full of people whose only goal is to tear those wings off.
He explains that art, or any kind of unique potential, isn't this robust, indestructible force that will inevitably conquer adversity.
Which is such an important point. We have this romanticized notion in our culture that true genius will always find a way to shine through, that hardship only tempers the steel of an artist.
The janitor completely dismantles that myth.
He tells Kim Kim that art is a fragile light. It is a tiny, flickering candle that can be blown out by a single sigh of disapproval, a careless critique, or systemic cruelty.
It doesn't survive on its own. It needs friends. It needs mentors and advocates to physically stand with their bodies against the wind, to cup their hands around the flame until it is strong enough to burn into an unstoppable inferno.
It's a damning critique of institutional failure, contrasted with the power of individual empathy.
Because the school system failed these kids. Social services failed them. The police failed them.
But specific, individual people stepped into the margins of their lives and cupped their hands around the flames.
My absolute favorite example of this is a tiny, almost throwaway interaction between Ted and his older brother that alters the course of multiple lives.
Ted's older brother is deeply embedded in gang culture. He's heading down a very dark, violent path, essentially caught in a current he doesn't know how to escape.
One night, they're sitting together, and the brother casually asks Ted what he wants to be when he grows up.
Ted, this quiet kid who struggles with language, says he wants to be a teacher.
His brother is surprised but supportive. He says that would be a great job because Ted's future students would have someone to look up to.
And Ted just looks at his older brother, this hardened gang member, and says, "You're enough to look up to."
The psychological impact of that sentence cannot be overstated.
The text notes that this was the very first time his big brother had ever been told by anyone that he was enough.
Think about the mechanics of shame and validation in young men involved in violence.
They are often driven by a profound sense of inadequacy. They seek respect and fear because they have never received genuine validation.
Ted's quiet, earnest belief in his brother pierces right through the armor. Backman shows us the immediate ripple effect of this.
Later that exact night, the brother is in a car with his gang, driving to a party with the specific intent to commit a violent, potentially lethal assault.
But he is sitting in the car, and he remembers what his little brother said. "You're enough to look up to."
He realizes that if he goes through with this violence, he will destroy the version of himself that his brother believes in.
So he asks the driver to pull over. He gets out of the car, walks away from his gang, and walks home.
The divergence in timelines from that single moment is staggering.
Right, because his friends stay in the car, go to the party, nearly beat a man to death, and end up serving long prison sentences.
Now, the brother isn't magically cured of his past. He still eventually goes to prison on a lesser previous charge.
But because he walked away from the catastrophic violence that specific night, his trajectory shifts just enough.
He later meets a woman, falls in love, and builds a family. 6 words from a 14-year-old boy altered his entire destiny.
We see a different version of this fierce protection with Christian's mother.
She is a deeply flawed character. She's struggling with severe addiction, constantly passing out on sleeping pills. She is not a reliable caregiver.
But there is an incident where Kim Kim and his friends break into a local museum at night.
They don't destroy anything. They mostly just do it to prove they exist in a space that actively excludes them.
But when the fallout happens, it acts as a violent wake-up call for his mother.
It pierces her addiction. She realizes that her son is drowning, and that if she doesn't act, his fragile light is going to be permanently extinguished.
In a moment of absolute desperate maternal clarity, she goes down to their damp basement, gathers up all of Kim Kim's scattered drawings from the floor, and marches into an art school in another town.
She basically corners the principal. She forces the institution to look at her son's talent, essentially bullying them into giving him a lifeline.
She saves his future by becoming the physical barrier between his art and the world's indifference.
Exactly.
But I want to stop here and push back on this entire framework for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Because as much as I love the janitor's speech and the metaphor of cupping hands around the flame, isn't Backman dangerously close to romanticizing the tortured artist trope here?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Is he arguing that art actually saves people? Because if we look at the reality of the text, Kim Kim becomes a world-famous artist, yes. His paintings sell for millions.
But he still dies at 39.
Right. He still spends the end of his life hiding from the world, consumed by anxiety, calculating the nitrogen and oxygen in his breath. So I have to ask, does art actually save anyone, or does it just give broken people a prettier, more culturally acceptable way to document their own destruction?
That is the exact philosophical tension Backman is wrestling with, and it's a vital distinction to make. If we read the text closely, Backman is emphatically not saying that art is a magical cure.
Okay.
Painting did not cure Kim Kim's physical illness. It did not erase the trauma of his childhood or fix his mother's addiction. If art were a cure, the museums wouldn't be filled with the works of tragic figures.
That's very true. So what actually saved him?
The people. What gave Kim Kim 39 years of life instead of 15 wasn't the canvas. It was the belief that his friends and mentors poured into him.
Oh, I see.
It was Jor taking the fall for the museum break-in so Kim Kim wouldn't get a record. It was his mother picking the drawings off the basement floor. It was Ted yelling artichoke.
So the art was simply the campfire they all gathered around.
Beautifully said. The paint itself provided no warmth. The warmth came entirely from the human beings standing shoulder to shoulder, cupping their hands around the flame. The art was just the mechanism that kept them together.
That reframes the entire concept. It completely strips away the elitism of art. You don't have to be a world-famous prodigy to have a flame worth protecting.
And you don't need a degree in fine arts to be the hands cupping that flame.
It's an active, daily choice to shield someone's spark from the wind, which forces you, listening right now, to ask yourself, whose spark are you protecting? Who is standing in the wind for you?
And being that person, standing in the wind for someone else, requires an incredible amount of endurance.
It is exhausting, and it often involves carrying the weight of the people we couldn't save.
Which transitions us into the final, most haunting act of the narrative, living with ghosts. Backman explores how we carry the dead and how grief must intrinsically intertwine with joy if we are going to survive it.
This is where Louise's present-day timeline comes into sharp focus. We start to understand why she is so combative and angry at 18.
She isn't just a moody teenager. She is actively drowning in grief.
We learn that she is mourning her foster sister, Fish, who recently died of a drug overdose.
Louisa is haunted by this loss, literally waking up screaming in the dark, unable to reconcile the reality of a world without her sister.
She is experiencing the absolute crushing weight of survivor's guilt.
It is the universal curse of anyone who has loved someone who died of an addiction or an overdose.
The mind endlessly loops through impossible scenarios. Like, if I had just called 5 minutes earlier, If I had never left the room.
If I could have just been with her every single second, I could have stopped it. It's magical thinking that tortures the survivor.
But alongside this guilt, Louisa also carries Fish's incredibly unique, defiant philosophy on life.
Fish was not a tragic, weeping figure. She was this brilliant, erratic, vibrant spark.
Fish had this philosophy that existence itself is mathematically absurd. The fact that the sun rises at the exact right distance to warm us but not burn us.
The fact that our lungs know how to pull oxygen from the air.
The fact that we are conscious beings sitting on a rock spinning through a terrifyingly empty universe. It is also statistically insane that dying isn't actually the tragedy.
Fish told Louisa, "It's just cool, really cool that we happened at all."
It is a radical acceptance of impermanence.
Backman draws a brilliant structural parallel here. Louisa is trying to figure out how to live after losing Fish.
And 25 years earlier, Ted and Jor had to figure out how to live after losing Kim Kim to his illness, and after losing Ali, the fierce girl from the pier, to the collateral damage of her father's debts.
The book doesn't give us the graphic details of Ali's death, which is a very intentional choice.
Right, the focus isn't on the mechanics of her dying. The focus is on the immense, gaping void her absence leaves in the mafia of 14-year-olds.
Yet despite this heavy accumulation of loss, Backman refuses to leave the reader in a pit of despair.
He shows us that survival isn't about moving on and forgetting. It's about learning to walk with the ghosts.
There's this beautiful, seemingly random encounter Louisa has with a taxi driver that perfectly encapsulates this.
He shares with her the two secrets to a long, enduring marriage. The first is holding hand, because if you are physically holding someone's hand, it disrupts the neurological pathways of anger.
It's very hard to stay furious when you are anchored to someone's skin.
And the second secret the taxi driver shares is even more profound. He says that halfway through every meal at a restaurant, he and his wife swap plates.
They literally trade their food. He explains, you must live with each other, not only alongside each other.
Swapping plates is such an incredible metaphor for radical empathy. It means taking on the flavor of someone else's experience, sharing their nourishment, and willingly taking on their burdens.
You aren't just parallel lines. You are intertwined, and that is exactly what the friends from the pier do for each other, even in death.
This leads to the crescendo of the book, which is a masterclass in blending grief with pitch-black humor.
Louisa goes to the cemetery to visit the graves, and she paints small wings on Kim Kim's gravestone.
Which is a direct, quiet nod to the janitor's speech about children born with wings.
And Jor is there at the cemetery. But Jor is wearing a bulky police ankle monitor.
Why? Because the Harbor Code didn't end when they turned 15. Jor took the fall for a crime his friends were involved in.
He went to prison so they wouldn't have to, swapping plates with them in the most extreme way possible.
So here they are, standing in a cemetery, physically moving Ali's memorial stone so it rests right next to Kim Kim's, reuniting the mafia.
And amidst this incredibly somber, heartbreaking moment, Jor looks at Ted, completely deadpan, and asks if they can pretend Ted died too.
Just so they can get out of all their adult obligations and go see a movie instead.
It's jarring if you are looking for a traditional solemn mourning scene.
But it is the most authentic depiction of trauma bonding. The humor is still their warning shout. It is still Ted yelling artichoke.
They survive the unbearable weight of the cemetery by deploying the absurd.
After the cemetery, Louisa walks down to the old pier. But it's not the abandoned, splintered dock of 25 years ago.
It's been gentrified. It's covered in luxury apartments, sleek cafes, and expensive restaurants.
The physical landscape of their youth has been paved over by the adult world.
But when Louisa sits at the edge and dangles her legs over the water, she doesn't see the gentrification.
She sees the ghosts. She sees the 4 teenagers exactly as they were, vibrating with life. She even swears she can smell the phantom fart from the painting.
Which brings up a critical structural question about the novel itself. As a reader, there is a moment earlier in the book, right when the kids are 14, where they were standing outside a museum.
Oh, I know the scene you mean.
They break a water sprinkler, and they are just dancing and laughing in the water in the middle of the night. It is a moment of pure cinematic perfection.
It really is.
So why didn't Backman just end the story there? Why drag the reader through the subsequent 25 years of overdoses, prison sentences, terminal illnesses, and grief?
I had that exact thought while reading. I wanted to close the book at the sprinkler and pretend they all lived happily ever after.
Because ending it at the sprinkler would be a fundamental lie about the nature of trauma. Backman insists on showing us the whole canvas.
Our culture loves the narrative of the singular, triumphant survival event. We love the idea that you slay the dragon of your childhood trauma, the credits roll, and you are fixed forever.
But survival is not a one-time event. It is a messy, grueling, daily, lifelong process.
You don't just survive an abusive home at 14 and then everything is fine at 30. You survive it every single day.
You survive it by carrying your dead with you, by making wildly inappropriate jokes at their graves, by swapping plates, and by hallucinating their laughter on a gentrified pier.
Showing the prison and the grief is what makes the laughter real. That is the actual triumph.
Which perfectly brings us to synthesizing all of these narrative threads. When we connect the dots, we realize that Kim Kim's painting, The One of the Sea, is the ultimate flawless metaphor for the human experience Backman is describing.
It operates entirely on perspective. If you stand back from the canvas, if you zoom way out, the painting and life itself looks like this vast, serious, terrifying, melancholic ocean.
It is a sea of trauma, of addiction, of systemic failure, and inevitable death. From a distance, it looks like it will swallow you whole.
But if you walk up to the canvas, if you get your face right up to the corner, ignoring the vastness of the ocean, what is life actually about?
It's about three small humans sitting on their backpacks so their butts don't burn on the hot wood of the pier, laughing so hard they literally cannot breathe because someone farted.
It is the absolute defiance of joy in the face of the abyss.
It perfectly captures the duality of human existence. From an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are hardwired for threat detection and survival.
This means our nervous systems store every single second of our worst trauma with agonizing clarity. We remember the terror vividly because biology thinks that will keep us alive.
But Backman argues that biology is only half the equation. The few moments of pure, unadulterated joy, the moments of connection, what the characters refer to as the really good nows, are the artillery we manufacture to fight back against the darkness our brains insist on holding on to.
We established that the universe is fundamentally unkind to fragile things. So what do the fragile things do? They find each other.
They build fortresses out of each other's ribs. They become a chosen family, a mafia that stands against the wind.
As we look at the totality of this story, I keep returning to a realization Ted has near the end of the book.
He is sitting up on a roof with Louisa, having recounted this entire epic, sprawling history of his friends.
He acknowledges the body count. He acknowledges who died too young, who went to prison, the dreams that didn't pan out.
He says that to an outside observer, it might sound like a deeply unhappy ending.
But then he reframes it completely. He tells her, it's only an unhappy ending if you forget how many times during the story we've told you that someone laughed.
That line is everything. It redefines what a successful life is. It's not the absence of tragedy, it's the persistence of shared joy despite the tragedy.
So we want to leave you with a provocative thought to carry with you today. Think about your own timeline. Think about the narrative you tell yourself about your own life.
When you look back at your history, are you looking at it through the eyes of the sterile adults at the high-end art auction?
Are you standing far back, only seeing the vast, serious ocean of your struggles, the sweeping tragedies, the heartbreaks, and the times you were failed?
Or are you willing to look closer? Can you zoom in on the canvas of your memory? Find the corner of the pier and remember the absurd, beautiful, inappropriate laughter that actually kept you alive.
The moments of pure connection that were the artillery against your darkness.
Take a moment today. Pick up your phone and text the person who cupped their hands around your fragile flame when the wind in your life was blowing the hardest.
Thank them for swapping plates with you. Thank them for yelling, "Watch out," when the containers were falling.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the margins of the canvas. And remember, no matter how fragile your light feels in the wind, you too are enough to look up to.
Keep zooming in on the canvas, keep finding the laughter, and we'll see you next time.